So friends, thank you for joining Skystone Partners today for the March 2023 installment of On Giving, incisive commentary and analysis at the intersection of philanthropy and the greater good. I'm Liz Knuppel, President and CEO of Skystone Partners, where we believe philanthropy is a powerful force for good. I am proud to welcome all of you attendees and our guest, Bernard Ross, Director of Equals MC, a management consulting agency. Bernard, would you like to come camera on and say hello to our friends?
Indeed.
Wonderful.
Blue from Edinburgh. Nice to see you, Elizabeth.
Excellent. And we have a national and now international group amongst us when we include Bernard. I suspect we've got some other international folks in our midst as well. And I'm just delighted to have Bernard here with us here today. He's the director of Equals MC, a management consulting agency working with nonprofit organizations worldwide. And thank you so much for coming, Bernard. I'm really excited about our topic today, which is about bringing the art and science of persuasion to the fundraising table. Together, we'll explore the power of decision science, a scientific approach to shaping ideas and improving interactions with supporters, donors, and customers for social good. It's so interesting to me to see how decision science combines behavioral economics, neuroscience, and evolutionary psychology. That's a mouthful. Lots of words I'm not even sure I know what they all mean, but they all come together to help organizations make better decisions that positively impact their fundraising and philanthropy results. So today, Bernard will share ideas, experiments, and case studies that underpin decision science, highlighting how it's used by leading organizations and increasingly by public bodies, charities, INGOs, and social enterprises. We'll also talk about strategies and tactics to enhance your fundraising efforts and create meaningful interactions with your supporters and donors. It's going to be a riveting conversation to enhance our skills in decision-making and creating social impact. First, let me tell you a little bit about our guest, Bernard, who is also our conversation partner. Bernard Ross is an internationally regarded expert on pro-social use of behavioral science. He's written and co-written or edited 8 award-winning books on fundraising and social change, a number of them with Claire Segal. Breakthrough Thinking won Best Nonprofit Book in the USA, and Global Fundraising was the first fundraising book to be published in China by Shanghai University Press. It was also the AFP Skystone Partners Prize for Research in Philanthropy winner in 2015. Bernard has also co-authored with Omar Mohammed of UNICEF International, and together they wrote the book on social change and decision science, Change for Good, and the follow-on book, Change for Better. He's advised many of the world's leading INGOs on including strategy, including UNICEF, UNHCR, IFRC, ICRC, and MSF. In recent years, he's raised money for Europe's largest scientific experiment to organize supplies for the biggest refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, for a museum to house the world's largest dinosaur in Argentina, and to save the last 800 great apes in Africa. So thank you, Bernard. We're delighted to have you.
Delighted to be here.
Excellent.
I always say to you when you read my biography, not everything on the internet is true. And I think that may be on the internet. But anyway, thank you. Very generous guy. And the good news is there are now over 1,000 of the great apes. So that's still not enough, but some things are going in the right direction.
Still not enough, but going in the right direction to be sure. Absolutely. So before we begin our conversation with Bernard, I'd like to just touch on a couple of housekeeping things. For those of you who have who've come to On Giving before, you know the drill, but I'd like to just give a couple of heads up about format. First, we'll have discussion. I've got some questions prepared for Bernard, and then we'll learn about his research experiments and work with nonprofit organizations. Then we'll have a few minutes for select questions from you before we wrap up our conversation. And so a word to the wise, you all have been greeting one another and us via the chat function. For Q&A, we'd like for you to switch over to the Q&A function. And our question moderator and member of the firm, Bill Mulvihill, will receive your questions. Behind the scenes right now, Bill is curating a number of them so that Bernard has the opportunity to answer as many as possible without duplicates. So Bill's back there right now, and he will join us front and center for a Q&A section. So now on to our headliner, Bernard Ross. So let's start with something really simple, Bernard, and it has to do with the term decision science. And it's one that not all of our members, not all of our attendees who are here with us maybe have heard before. So I wonder, can you tell us what it means and a little bit about how evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral economics play into it?
Okay. Imagine 3 circles, I guess is the easy way to do it. In one circle is a body of understanding called evolutionary psychology, which means the choices or the preferences that are hardwired into us have been hardwired into us since we all walked out of Ethiopia or somewhere very close to Ethiopia 200,000 years ago. So as an example, as we walked out of Ethiopia, we walked across the plains of Africa towards Cincinnati. So why you would leave beautiful Ethiopia to come to Cincinnati, who knows? But anyway, people did. People were wild. You might over in the far right-hand side of your vision see, well, is it a snake or is it a stick? Mm-hmm. And you can't really tell at this distance. And so you have to make a choice about whether it's worth going to look and establish whether it's a stick, which is quite a useful thing, or a snake. And 9 times out of 10, you would say, you know what? If it's a snake, there's a negative consequence there. So I will walk on because there's always another stick. And how that translates into evolutionary psychology is that human beings have a tendency to avoid negative consequences. Negative consequences have a higher demand on our intellectual resources than positive consequences. Why is that important in fundraising? People very often want to sell visions, and visions are good things and have a benefit, but the negative consequences of, oh my goodness, this beautiful painting could be lost to the world. We may never see a great ape again. People are dying now of hunger in Yemen. The negative consequences, and I wish this wasn't true, negative consequences very often outweigh positive consequences in terms of an appeal.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Another really simple example, evolutionary psychology, is when we greet each other, we look for eyes very quickly. And the reason, because again, if you're walking through the jungle or through the savannah, if things have eyes, they probably have intelligence, and they may you're either going to be prey for them or you're going to be a predator on them. So we look for eyes among things. And that's why I've got some slides I can show you later on of, like, quite often attractive brands, for example, have eyes in them. They use face type imagery. Or why, if you look at a Disney character, Disney characters have enormously large eyes.
Right.
And we'll come to another reason why that's, and that's attractive. So that's the evolutionary psychology bit. Some programmed things which are hardwired into us, and those are important in fundraising. Second thing is what we've called neuroscience. So we now, in the last 10, 15 years, have an amazing technology called fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, which allows us to look inside the brain and see what areas of our brain are activated at various points. And you can tell it through the degree of electrical activity in the brain. Super interesting from a fundraising point of view is that the same part of the brain which is activated when you give me a gift, Elizabeth, is activated when I give you one. So we all know about the power of reciprocity. We knew that was a rule, that if I bought you if I said to you, oh, Elizabeth, hi, I know it's 5 o'clock on December 24th. I just bought you a very small present the day before Christmas, and you have not bought me one. You are doomed to guilt for the next 365 years because you have broken the rule of reciprocity.
Yeah.
You have broken that fundamental rule. But what's interesting is we didn't know why that role was so important. And the answer is that the same chemical area, the same neurological area is activated when I give you something and you give me something. So that's super interesting in fundraising. It means that I'm seeking a gift from you. And so when you come to my office, I should offer you a cup of tea or a cup of coffee as a kind of gift. I should present you with my case for support, you know, in a not a ceremonial way, but in a way that makes it clear I'd like to give you a copy of the case for support. I've packaged it nicely. It's nicely presented. It's printed on nice paper because I'm giving you a kind of, I'm trying to literally activate a part of your brain. There's super interesting neuroscience.
Yeah.
And to connect that to the, that's a very long answer, but I promise I'll stop. Connect that to the previous discussion about eyes. One of the things we know is that when mothers make eye contact with, well, not just mothers, fathers care about children too, but when mothers make eye contact with babies, it helps stimulate a chemical called oxytocin, which is also known as the empathy drug. You know, there are 4 drugs that are very important to us: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. You probably heard of them. Actually, I want to persuade all of you to become what I call donor drug dealers, or I sometimes call them philanthropic pharmacists. Sounds slightly classier, but essentially, how do we stimulate those drugs in people? And you know, the dopamine drug is the drug of anticipation. Oh my goodness, it'll be so exciting when I see the new building built, or when I open the women's refuge, or I know that, you know, people are safe from HIV or whatever. But oxytocin is the drug that, as I would say, we get from mothers and children bonding through eye contact. And eye contact is what drives oxytocin in our bodies. That's why, Elizabeth, I'm going to share the sadness in my life. You know, when you've been with your partner for a while and you go out for dinner, it's kind of embarrassing to go out with a couple who have just fallen in love, because, you know, with your existing partner, you read the newspaper, you know, look at LinkedIn for new jobs. You don't need to pay attention. 2 new partners are staring in each other's eyes lovingly. They're feeding each other. They're living on oxytocin. They're feeding each other oxytocin.
Gotcha.
Every Disney character has huge eyes to drive oxytocin in the minds of viewers. So there's a thought: how do we become donor drug dealers and drive that drug in our donors to make them understand what it's like? Because if I'm a guy, I have never suffered domestic violence in the way that a woman might suffer it. You know, I've never been really hungry in the way that people in Yemen are really hungry. I don't know what it's like to be, as a young girl in Afghanistan, to be denied the opportunity to even go to school. How do I empathize about those things when they are completely outside my physical experience? And the answer is, tell me the story, drive some oxytocin in my body or in my brain. Wow, I'm on board with you. The third part, the behavioral science bit, is about the nudges, the psychological cues we give people, which drive behavior. So there are, I'll give you an example. The way I got into this was, and I've got a slide I can show you on, I was training some people to do face-to-face fundraising in New York. And I was teaching them all kinds of clever techniques. And one team were doing really well, and I couldn't understand why. There were 5 or 6 teams throughout the city. I couldn't understand, because they weren't the brightest people. They weren't the most socially engaged people. You know, the place where they were standing wasn't especially. And then I went to watch them and discovered they were standing beside a sign near the subway. And that sign, I can show you the sign if you like, was giving a psychological cue to people who passed by them, which increased the average monthly gift of a sign up. I'll show you the sign later on. But so psychological cues, images, sounds, smell. You know, smell is a very powerful motivator. If you can, you know, you can alter people's mood with smell or music. So using those kind of cues. Okay, so big explanation. 3 big circles: evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, behavioral economics, combine into decision science. We draw from all three to do more fundraising and do it better scientifically.
Got it. Got it. So, and all three of these, you gave some interesting examples of a little bit here, a little bit there about how each one of these plays a specific role in our corner of the world when we're working with nonprofit organizations. And so we've talked a little about how donors' choices are influenced by those things. I am curious because I've been doing some reading of your book, and one of your more recent ones, Change for Better. And one of the things you mention is how our donors' choices are influenced by the amount of information presented to them. So you've given us sort of our Venn chart, our Venn diagram of the three ingredients that make up decision science that help drive those donors' decisions. But I'm very curious about the amount of information and what kind of information and how that influences our donors' decisions.
Okay, great question. Total amount of information available,
Mm-hmm.
what might use to make choices. We overshare. We overshare. I mean, people like to, we love to think we're rational beings, and we're not. I want to maintain that we are by and large irrational, which is not the same as random. Random is a different thing. Irrational is, again, let me go back to the sadness of my own life. Maybe if I was choosing a life partner, before I actually got to the business of setting up house or getting married, I'd say, can I just check out your credit rating? Do you have any information on previous lovers or how good you are at loving?
Scorecard, little data sheet, right?
Yeah,
check.
I can see some people in the chat saying, yeah, I did do that. Can I find out can you take a gene test to find out how good your genes are? We don't do that. We fall in, you fall often instantly, randomly, delightfully, passionately in love. And then you spend the rest of your life saying, providing a rationale for it. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing. But what's the data to make that super important choice? We use a tiny amount of data, and to make choices about the causes we support. I mean, I don't, if I step outside and walk down towards my local supermarket, I might pass in the area in front of the supermarket, I might pass three people collecting, three people. One might be charming woman collecting for a local hospice. One might be an equally charming young man collecting for the Boy Scouts or the girl, for a local youth cause. And the third person might be collecting for a local food bank. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't approach those three people, go past them, look at each of their cans, so each of their collecting devices, have a think about how much money I should give in view of the fact I'm about to go and spend money in the supermarket, go back and say there's $3 here, $2 here, $1 here. We don't do that. More often, the very first person you come to, you put money in, and then you sneak past the other two people going, oh, so I gave already. And right. They're saying, different cause. Hang on a minute, you gave money to the Girl Scouts to do coding. That's very nice to empower young women to do coding, but I'm talking about poverty. Mm-hmm. We're not making those random choices. I love the opera. I give money to opera. Why am I doing that? It's so incredibly, we make all kinds of random choices. And my two theses would be, one is that we probably overshare in terms of our case for support because we know too much about this issue. Now, I'm not saying, one of the things I do know is that if you're doing a case for support, for example, by all means, give people a big folder of information.
Yeah.
They're not going to read it.
Right.
Read it.
That's right.
I think I explained to you and your colleague Sam earlier that I've just recently bought an unbelievably expensive fancy pants new device on my computer, especially for today. I could have spent the money on a new sweater or a better haircut, but no, I bought a new fancy pants device. I bought it on the basis of a very charming young person who explained to me how simple it was to use. I didn't really watch the whole of the video because I was busy, and I just thought, well, I'll spend $200 on that and buy it. It seems fine.
Yeah.
And then asked me, and then came out and said, do you accept the terms of the software? And I just clicked yes.
Mm-hmm.
I read 200 pages of stuff.
Absolutely.
It's called cognitive load.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains, here's a slightly frightening statistic, which may not be true for all political leaders in both of our countries. Our brains use 20% of our energy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our literal physical energy. They're only 2% of the weight. And so one of the problems is that our brains are optimized to say, don't think too much about this. And as fundraisers or social influencers in whatever social field we have, we sometimes give people too much information, and so people struggle to process it. And they either then time out,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because there's a very famous example, I'm sure you've heard of, which in a supermarket, there's you know, where you get offered a chance to taste different spices.
Sausages or jelly or new olive oil or something amazing, right?
Would I eat a sausage from a supermarket store? Anyway, there's an example of jams or preserves where they have in one stall they had 32 different kinds of jams.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people came up to that stall and tried a couple of jams. And then when they were asked to subsequently make a purchase, only something like 20% of them made a purchase. Mm-hmm. When they had a much smaller number of people, which is say when they had a much smaller number of jam samples, say about 6 samples, mm-hmm. the same number of people roughly came up to try the jams, but 40% of people bought a jam. So about twice as many people, and you would say, well, that's kind of counterintuitive because people like choice. Yes, but too much choice makes us confused.
Got it. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's just about cognitive overload. So, you know, again, when you're offering a gift opportunity ladder, there are 100 ways you can support a cause. No, that's too many. Don't give me too many ways to support. Because the cognitive overload will make me withdraw from it and say, I can't decide. I have no, give me 3 choices, give me 4 mm-hmm. choices. Mm-hmm. And I would prefer the choice in the middle for a reason called the Goldilocks effect. But there you go.
Right, absolutely. So basically, when we're talking to our donors and our supporters or our future supporters, what we want to do is make sure that we present them with a beautiful package because mm-hmm. of the law of reciprocity, something lovely and beautiful that we all know they're not going to read. But if it's picturesque, if it's well designed, if it's well thought out, and you know at home, they're going to rifle through it later and just take a look at it here and a look at it there. Mm. But we want to make it big, bold, clear, personal, with eyes, really demonstrating what our cause is.
Printed on nice paper.
Printed on beautiful stock.
If I sent you the same resume, one printed on 100, what in UK we'd call 120 gram paper, mm-hmm. one printed 80 gram paper, exactly the same qualifications,
right?
You know, in a blind test, more people will say this candidate is better mm-hmm. than the other candidate. The only difference is the weight of the paper.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I've heard similar studies before. So there are all of these things rolling around in how people make decisions. And we're fortunate enough to have fMRIs and to understand evolutionary psychology and know what those little nudges or little cues are. And we've talked a little bit about amount of information and helping people make decisions. But what I'm really curious about is, don't hate me. Who cares? No. Why is this behavioral science? Why is decision science now more important to all of us in our sector of the world of nonprofit organizations? Why is it more important than it has ever been before?
Results, Liz. It's all about results.
Tell me, is it so that the guy with the can standing in front doesn't get the dime? Or there's too many guys with cans?
The person standing in front of the right sign gets twice as much dime. I mean, I think we have quite a lot of data through experiments and through study and essentially by being, I'm not an academic in the sense that I spend my time doing academic studies. I'm interested in doing studies that drive results. So lots of the big campaigns we've run in the last 10 years, something I've been informed by decision science, and as a result of being informed by decision science, have improved results. Let me give you an example. I think there's someone here from the zoo.
We've got Zoo Knoxville for sure. I don't know if we have other zoos too.
Nice to see. So we did some work for Edinburgh Zoo, which is just up the road here. Was getting about £20,000. That's what, about $30,000, $25,000 a year in individual gifts a year. That's peanuts. Now, the reason for that was because they were really, they're a visitor attraction. Most of the people who went were families, relatively low income families, going to the zoo for an interesting day out with kids to see the animals. Lots of your cultured philanthropic elites don't like zoos. I don't really like zoos. It's like a, you know, some people say it looks especially like a jail for animals, you know, but I'm uncomfortable in zoos is what I would say. They were doing very badly. So then they asked us to help them raise individual income especially as they lost money during the pandemic when they were essentially shut, but the animals still needed fed and the staff had to go in to look after the animals. In 18 months, we increased individual giving from £20,000, $30,000, to £1.3 million, $1.6 million, using decision science principles. And I could show you a page. I think there's a little case study in the book you've mentioned that explains how we did it using 3 very, very simple decision science principles. And well, that's quite an impressive result. I think they're very happy about it. Indeed. The super interesting thing about that, to me anyway, is we talk to people who don't like zoos. So we persuaded people who don't like zoos to give money to the zoo. And of course, they didn't give money to the zoo, they gave money to the animals. Right. The zoo wanted to explain this very complicated, sophisticated conservation argument. And we said, forget about all that. The proposition is feed the animals. Even although everyone was clear the animals would be fed. And what was super interesting when we provided choices, for example, quite a lot of our sophisticated donors who didn't like zoos really liked, the most popular thing to buy was bamboo for the pandas. For the pandas. Bamboo. Now, to be honest with you, I love pandas, but they really, really don't deserve to exist anymore. I mean, they are so lazy. Oh, stop. Now, Bernard, I'm gonna stop you now. I'm a zoo girl. We work with a lot of zoo clients. We have a lot of zoo friends here who have a lot of time and capital invested in these pandas. So you be nice about the pandas. No, they're attractive, but they're not keen to procreate. I mean, which is what you really want a panda to do. You want a panda to produce panda babies, and they're unbelievably choosy about their diet. So what was interesting was people liked paying £116, $150 a day for some fancy pants bamboo. Well, some fancy pants zoo diet. So it's just about, again, I'm making my point about the rationality of why you would support the zoo wasn't there at all. It was an irrational, not illogical decision. So, and that same things apply talking about, like, let me give what for me is a hugely challenging example, based on some research with Save the Children. I say to you, or I send you a proposition, Elizabeth, saying there are 4 million young people in, I can see you getting anxious about, okay, someone popped into the screen then. I know, who's that? I thought we were about to be Zoom bombed there by a zoo militant, by a panda militant. I say to you, we did this work with Save and then subsequently repeated it with Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. I say to you, there are 4 million kids starving today in Yemen. And you go, that's terrible, Bernard. Tell me where Yemen is. what does the number 4 million mean? I have no concept of what is, I can hardly count above number. I can imagine what 100 people is like, and maybe 50,000 if I go to the ball game. That's the whole stadium. But what does 4 million mean? I have no idea what that number means. So if I send you that as a proposition versus if I send you a proposition saying, Elizabeth, let me tell you about Maddie. Maddie is 12. She lives in Yemen. She would really like to eat tomorrow, but she can't eat tomorrow. Or she would really like, she has a sore thing in her arm. She would love it to fix the sore thing in her arm because then she could write. We know that that second one, that Maddie one, the individual, will achieve a higher return than the 4 million. Now, the 4 million is the problem. Yemen is the problem. But we need to present
a manageable, quantifiable number. Is that
and also one where I feel agency, you know, like I need to feel agency in this, and that idea of like, you know, an important psychological attribute is the ability to have agency. How do I make a difference here? Sadly, and this is to me is extraordinary, if I then say to you, Elizabeth, thank you so much for supporting Maddie. Maddie has a brother called Aziz. Could you support Maddie and Aziz? Your average gift will go down because you're now being asked to support 2 rather than 1. So it's not even the difference between 4 million and 1. It's the difference between 2 and 1.
Yeah.
Now, that makes no sense. You're a humanitarian, as well as being a slightly weird panda lover. But that makes no sense. And it doesn't make sense to you, because in a sense you go, well, of course, I'd like to help our brother too. But we know that your average gift will go down. That, I have to be honest with you, that distresses me, because that should not be true in a fair world. And we should be, you know, we should be looking after pandas and looking after precious pre-Raphaelite works and galleries, and we should be looking after hungry kids in Yemen. We should be doing all those things. Yeah. But we don't do all those things in a fair way. We do them in an irrational way. And I think as fundraisers, my job as a fundraiser is to advise people about the best way to present your case, or your proposition more properly in that case, that secures the maximum impact and the maximum bang for your buck, if you like.
And so you've talked a little bit about the irrationality of the way that we make our choices and how it relates back to decision science. I am curious, you know, I asked, why is this more important now than results? That is one word answer. Results is why it's more important than ever. But what are some of the unintended consequences of applying decision science to our fundraising programs?
Okay, I almost want to say not unintended, because the advantage of science is there is intentionality. I think what's interesting to me is that we've been doing stuff unintentionally that's worked. I mean, you know, I did stuff for years and years as a fundraiser, and I said, well, I don't know why this works, but it works. Like, I didn't know why putting items in the middle of our list worked. I just knew it worked. I didn't know why envelopes were so important. And I could just say, well, I don't know why it works. It just does work. It doesn't matter. I didn't know why sentences of 17 words and less beat sentences of 26 words or more, which is what the average graduate is encouraged. You know, you leave university encouraged to write long sentences. You then have to unlearn that thing that you learned at university that gets you a good grade, and learn to write in short 17-word sentences with active verbs, because that's what, and we now understand why those things work. So that's the good thing about the intentionality. Bad news is it creates the possibility, as it does in the commercial world, of what's called not nudge, but sludge, by which, you know, again, we'll give you an example. I mentioned I love opera. There's an opera company that I don't love in England. I'm not going to name them. But if you go onto their website, you know, in fairness, they have stopped doing it now because I reported them to the authorities for it. If you go onto their website, it said, thank you for booking a ticket for this opera. we assume you'd like to make a £25 donation. And if you don't want to make this £25 donation on top of your ticket, you can call up tomorrow and I'll do it. I was incandescent, and I called the guy up, the chief executive, and I said, this is outrageous. And he said, it works. I said, well, I don't doubt it works. Of course it works. It's just disgraceful. It's dishonest. And he said, it's not illegal. And I said, well, no, it's not illegal. It's just dreadful. So that's like, you know, when you take out you take out Amazon Prime, one foolish night, one drunken night, you fall in love and you take out a subscription to Amazon Prime. Getting out of the marriage is relatively easy. Getting out of Amazon Prime is a 5-year struggle with Amazon. Is that right? And I think Amazon's quite, so sludge is when we use some of these techniques in a manipulative way, either doesn't fit with our ethics or the values and beliefs of our customers or of our organization.
Right.
It works, but it's not, it's kind of not right. There's an interesting debate there. The second thing is any technique incompetently applied. So again, I could show you a slide if you want. We've done some work with an opera company. The simple device of changing the sequence of their asks, you know, so would you like to make a donation? You bought a ticket, would you like to make a donation? You can make a donation of £1 or £5 or £10 or £15 by simply reversing that, £15, £10.
Yep.
You get a thing called priming, which is where because the first number is 15.
Yep.
You're more likely to, you know, and I can show you data which shows that it does move. Now, people will come back to me and say, oh, well, that didn't work. And I said, but the problem is the rest of your website is entirely rubbish. Just because you've changed the numbers. Right,
one thing isn't going to fix it, right?
One thing is going to fix it. You know, if you don't give me a sense of, well, what will 50, why would I choose £15? What does that do? Tell me what the agency is I get that. Another nice example of that, Liz, is, and I think I've spoken to you about the power of numbers before, is when we were doing that experiment, we put in randoms because we don't not everyone counts in units of 5, 10, 15, just every fundraiser, sadly. And in the middle of a string like that, we put in, I think it was 25, 18, 14, 7, 5, whatever it was. And the fundraiser I was working with noticed that she got a surprisingly large number of 18s. She was getting £18 gifts, £180 gifts. There was an 18 thing going on, and she didn't know why there was an 18 thing going on. I think you and I discussed this earlier. Do you know the answer? So
I do, but I'd like you to tell her. I'd like you to tell her.
Well, in the chat knows. So there's a culture or a belief system or a value system or a faith, if you like, where the number 18 is super important, and that's in the Jewish faith, where the letters of the Jewish alphabet relate to a specific number, and the number 18 signifies generosity or giving and philanthropy. So she discovered by accident that by putting the number 18 in, because it referred to that Jewish faith belief, she was getting Jewish donors saying, I want to make a gift of that number. Right.
Because it resonated with their values.
Yeah.
Right?
So how interesting that. Now, it doesn't resonate especially with, I don't know what your faith is. I don't have faith. So it kind of doesn't resonate with us. And I give you another example, which was the, in Oxford University, actually discovering that a donor wanted to make a gift for £8,888,888.88, and he wanted to write a check for that amount of money. It's kind of old school, writing a check. And again, I'm sure many of your members will guess that that person was from the Chinese community, where the number 8 is super, I mean, more important than the number 7 is in a kind of traditional seven dwarfsy way. And by him writing that check for £8,888,888, he acquired in himself a lot of good luck. Well, stop thinking in tens or in hundreds. Not every country thinks like that.
Right.
Change your numbers on something as simple as your ask string, and be aware of it. And that, to me, that's, as I tell it, it's so obvious, and yet people aren't thinking about this stuff. They just think, oh, 5, 10, 15, 20. If I put down 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, people will go for, yes, people will more likely go for 15, but actually you're really wasting your time doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you say, not really unintended consequences, but in applying decision science, there are two sort of potential pitfalls that you named for us. And one is, quite frankly, getting sludge, not nudge. So being very concerned about ethical practices, which of course we all sign the code of ethics as members of AFP. And then the other thing you mentioned is when decision science is inaptly applied or clumsily applied, you're not necessarily going to get those results, which is the very reason to be bringing this into our fundraising practice. So before we turn it over to our group for questions, because I do want to make sure that we do have time for audience questions. Bernard, there's something that you have an acronym that I love ever so very much called EASIEST. And I don't know if you can recite it. I'm sitting in front of it right now. We'll make sure that everybody has an opportunity to see it. But would you tell us about easiest in avoiding friction and being able to apply decision science in our fundraising practice?
Okay. Oh goodness, if I can remember.
Is that too big a question?
No. The big thing is the biggest single, but I mean, let's be clear. Decision science can do a wonderfully powerful thing. And I can show you this again in a slide. Mm-hmm. You can change people's behavior without changing their minds. Mm-hmm. So it works at a level, okay? Mm-hmm. However, that does not mean that you can convince people to do things that they don't naturally want to do. So decision science doesn't help people who just don't care about orphans to care about orphans. It doesn't, people who just don't care about puppies cannot be convinced to care about puppies. But what you can do is convince people who care a little bit about children to care a bit more about orphans and to make a higher gift or puppies or whatever. So it's about, you're still looking for people who are basically philanthropic. That was the point in the zoo story. You're looking for people who care about animals. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So removing friction is the biggest single thing to persuading people who want to do things do best. Easiest is a way of thinking about removing friction. The letters stand for E, it must be ethical. Mm-hmm. Okay. S stands, I think, for social, I hope. Is that right? Uh-huh. Social. So we like to do things that other people do.
Right.
Hey, you're one of 100 great people doing this.
Join with me.
Join with me. I hate it when you're on a site and it says donate now, and it should say something like join the tribe, join the club, become one of our founder members, be like other women, support women in crisis. The act of clicking that button should be the act of joining a tribe of some sort, some kind of tribe. Yeah. The next one, I is for Info-lite. Is that right? Okay. So don't overshare. Don't make it too complicated. How simple can you? It's Occam's razor. It's E equals MC squared. Stands for the most complicated theory of the universe in the world, but how simple can you make it for people? Yeah. EASI. E stands for emotional.
Emotional.
Yeah. Okay. What's the emotion you want to create? And again, being clear about. I think I maybe made clear when I was talking. I feel social injustice makes me feel angry. When I walk past homeless people, I feel so angry that, unlike maybe the US, I live in a social state where I agree to pay quite a lot of tax in my country because I recognize that I think in my social model, I need the government to do stuff about homeless people who need mental health care and social care and detoxification care and housing. And that's my social contract. So I get angry about the fact that, that isn't being dealt with. Whereas my partner, who's a much better person and a much kinder person, wants to give people £5 or some money to pay for a meal. And she feels sad and I feel angry. What's the emotion you want people to? Right.
How do you want them to feel?
How do you want them to feel about this? And being clear about the emotion and not necessarily the emotion that you want to have, the emotion they want to have. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
ES is for story.
Story-fied.
Well, we like
Story-fied.
story all the way from, parables all the way through to I have a dream. I mean, Martin Luther King did not say, listen, I've got some great key points I want to share against a balanced scorecard, like people going, what?
I have a dream.
I have a dream.
I don't have a checklist.
I know, a checklist or a spreadsheet or indeed Gantt chart. I just have a dream. That's what we want to do. S and T is the last one. Am I on the last one?
Yes. Yep. Last one.
Timely. Now, in time is very interesting, and we have very short timelines. So, by all means, sell a 10 years away dream to build the museum or to build the women's refuge, but give people we are, again, as part of our evolutionary, that we have very short timelines in terms of thinking about how far ahead things are. Interesting thing that's happening at this moment. I was reading an article earlier about shopping, and there's a big move away in the UK. I don't know if it's happening in the US. You used to be able to collect points for everything. If you did anything, you could collect points, and then you could turn the points into a banana or
whatever.
Or sorry, well, okay.
Right.
And there's a move away from points because people are saying points are too far away for me to gain the benefit. I don't want them. I want a discount now.
Now.
There's been a move in retail towards saying a discount now, a money back, get your money back today. Buy the washing machine and get $50 back today. Because people are looking for that short
time limited.
So time limited. Be aware of people's propensity to think in a short term way.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your easiest acronym to avoid friction relative to applying decision science. We're going to turn things over. Bill Mulvihill has been behind the scenes. I think he's been collecting some of our questions along the way. And so, Bill, what do we have in store for Bernard? What's burning on everyone's mind?
Before we get to the questions, 3 of the people asked if we could go through the easiest.
I'll put it in the chat.
We'll send it.
Okay, so we got that.
We'll send it along. We'll put it. Yeah.
So Emily asked, any advice for building a culture of giving in a place where people have donated randomly but not strongly? What program in place for retention, understanding of how dollars are spent, etc.?
Is that one for me, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. I don't believe that it's random. I think you just haven't discovered what the underlying principles were. It's a little technique we very often use, which might be helpful, was to look, go back, Elizabeth, to that word tribe. So we did some work for a museum in Bristol in England and had what appeared to be fairly random set of gifts from people, some hundreds of people over some years in varying amounts. And we went back to them, and instead of asking them about why they gave to the museum, and I want to discourage people from doing that kind of research because I think it's meaningless. I think there is a huge difference between what I call do data and say data. People say stuff that they think they should say. So when you ask them a question like, why did you give to this cause? They either give you the answer they think is socially acceptable or the answer that they think you are looking for. It's super hard to get away from that. Behavioral experiments are all founded on actual behavior. So we went back to these people, and the thing we did was we sent them a little survey which simply said, what do you do when you're not with the museum? And people could list things like, I'm a walker, I'm a painter. And the biggest single commonality was gardening. So what we did was we changed the language of the appeals, which had been getting no results at all, to gardening metaphors. Plant, grow, nurture, seeds. And bang, we had discovered the commonality that was not to do with the museum or love of yes, they loved the museum, but by using the language of gardening, we suddenly be able to get people to make more gifts. The other thing we discovered, slightly by the by, was that people who had moved into the town, very often you might think, well, who would be the people who'd be most fond of a civic museum? Would be local people who had been born and bred there. No, the people who were most fascinated by the museum and wanted to give most were people who've moved into there because they had made a choice to move there. Does that make sense? So to me, that's about looking for the common, I almost want to begin with not the behavioral end, but say you've got the behavior of giving. What is the commonality that has driven people to give? Is it they moved into, again, at a higher level, of the 10 highest private donors in the UK, 5 of them are refugees who have chosen to move to this country, mostly from the Indian or subcontinent, the Hinduja brothers. And what do they give money to? Super British things like the Royal Shakespeare Company, like the British Red Cross. Do they give money to South Indian dance charities, which is what lots of people think they would do? No, they're not really. I don't want to say they're not interested in that. They're focused on showing their Britishness. How interesting is that? So that's, look for the commonality, and the commonality, look for the commonality outside what they do with you, would be my advice, if that helps.
Sure, it does. Great advice. Let me finish with one question. So there was a gentleman named Don Hewitt who came up with an idea and created something that happens every Sunday night, and it's about telling a story. He has the longest running show on television, and when he was asked, why do you think it was so successful? He said simply 4 words: tell them a story. I think that applies very much to what we're all trying to do, is to tell a story as to why your support's so important.
Can I add one thing to that, Bill?
Absolutely.
Okay. And it's kind of, again, it's kind of, give them a story to tell. Don't tell your story. When I'm telling a story, I tell a story, which means that if you're at dinner, Bill, tonight with Elizabeth, so what were you doing today, Bill? And you can say, well, but Elizabeth, let me tell you, today I saved the last great apes in Africa. Today I made sure that a kid in Afghanistan, a girl younger in Afghanistan who wanted to have a book to read, she had that book. Fundraisers are obsessed with themselves. Oh, it's the most solipsistic business in the world. Sorry, I've been mean about pandas and fundraisers now. My career may have
maybe over
just in 60 minutes. There we go, Elizabeth. That's your power. So that business about giving someone what is their story that we want to tell to their children, their partner. If you're a business person, I sold a gazillion cars today. Nobody cares. Your partner doesn't care. Your kids don't care. Your rivals don't care. But today I didn't just sell cars. I helped make sure that the planet was safe. I planted 1,000 trees. I made sure the air on the planet was a little greener. There's a story I want to tell. Stop being obsessed with your story. Give them a story to tell. So give them a story to tell. 6 words.
Let me finalize, Bill, on that real quick. When I would visit a donor the first time, many times they would say, well, you're only here to get a gift. You're only here to get money. And my answer was, no, I'm not today. I'm here to learn more about you and what makes you tick. And I'm confident I can connect you to something we do that you get passionate about. But today I'm not here to raise money. And it's not about me.
The money's just the mechanic. I mean, the money and you as the agency are just the mechanic, to connect the donor with good they want to do in the world, whether that's saving paintings for the nation or feeding kids or helping girls to code, whatever it is they do. You're just a bridge.
That's right.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I think that's all we got.
Well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill. And Bernard, thank you so much. This has been really a fascinating conversation about how our hardwiring works, you know, how neuroscience can be applied, the things that we can do to really help get results. Because I think both Bill and Bernard at the end of the conversation said, it's not about the money. It's about giving them a story that they're excited to tell, and the money will come so we can all achieve the good we seek to do living on this planet. So thank you guests for coming today. Thank you, Bernard, for coming today and talking to us a little bit about how science backs up and can inform our results as fundraisers so that we can do great work on the planet. So remember, thank you again. We're on a brief hiatus for the month of April with On Giving because it butts up so closely to the AFP Icon Conference held this year in New Orleans. But here's a special little thing. If you would like to learn more about decision science, Bernard is actually teaching his 2023 decision science masterclass on the Saturday before the official conference begins. And we will forward that link to you all if you plan to be in New Orleans for the AFP conference this year so that you have an opportunity to learn more and follow up. Additionally, if I will also be in New Orleans at that time, and I hope that Bernard and I will be having dinner one night there. But if any of you all are coming, please drop me a line and we can grab a cup of coffee. Either I or one of our colleagues will be delighted to chat with you and maybe come up with some solutions to your most recent fundraising puzzle. It's great to see you all here in the webinar, but I'd love to meet you in person. So you can join us for our next On Giving when we reconvene on Tuesday, May the 9th for part 2 of our conversation with Lisa New of Zoo Knoxville and David Walsh of Canopy Partners on strategic planning and fundraising. We'll be here again at our regular time, 12 p.m. Eastern. So keep a lookout for the invitation. Again, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Bill. Most importantly, thank you, Bernard, for making the trip all the way across the pond to be with us here today. And thank you, Sam Martin, who is our executive assistant and office manager, and make sure that the technological magic happens so that we can have these kinds of conversations. Go forth, do good work. Philanthropy is a powerful force for good. Thank you.
Thank you.